Picture yourself standing in the cold darkness of the longest night. The sun has been fading for months. Each day it rises a little lower, sets a little sooner. Your ancestors didn't know if it would ever return. Imagine their fear. Imagine their hope. Long ago, when the winter solstice arrived, people across the world lit fires, built monuments, and whispered prayers into the frozen air. They believed they could call the sun back from the edge of forever. Tonight, let yourself drift into their world. Feel the ancient cold. See the first flames pierce the darkness. Breathe slowly. Relax. We're going back to the longest night, when humanity refused to let the light die. Close your eyes. The story begins now. The first humans to notice the dying sun must have felt their hearts sink with it. Every morning, the light rose a little weaker. Every evening, darkness swallowed the world a little sooner. They watched the sun creep lower along the horizon, tracing a path that seemed to lead toward some terrible end. No books explained what was happening. No elders remembered a time when it had been different. They simply watched and wondered if the light would vanish completely. In the depths of Ice Age Europe, perhaps 40,000 years ago, someone made a decision. They gathered dry wood and struck stone against stone until sparks caught. They fed the flame carefully, watching it grow against the encroaching dark. That fire was more than warmth. It was defiance. It was hope made visible. If the sun could abandon them, they would create their own light. They would refuse to let darkness win without a fight. Archaeological evidence from sites across France and Spain shows hearth fires deliberately maintained through the winter months. These weren't casual cooking fires, allowed to die and restart. They were tended constantly, fed through the coldest nights, kept alive as if human attention could somehow anchor the fleeing sun. The ash layers tell stories of vigil, someone always watching, someone always feeding the flame. The smoke from those fires rose into freezing air and disappeared into the void above. Did they imagine it reaching the sun? Did they hope their small earthly flames could remind the great fire in the sky of its duty? We can't know their exact thoughts, but we know they didn't simply accept the darkness, they met it with light of their own making. When the solstice finally arrived and the sun began its slow return, those ancient people must have felt a surge of profound relief. Their fires had worked. Their vigil had mattered. The sun had heard them. Whether the connection was real or imagined didn't matter. They had done something instead of nothing. They had pushed back. That first winter fire became a tradition that would never die. Every culture that came after would remember to light flames when the sun grew weak. They would remember that darkness is not accepted passively. They would remember that humans are creatures who make light. Across the rolling plains of southern England, enormous stones began moving. Blue stones from the Preseli Hills in Wales, some weighing for tons, traveled over 200 miles. Sarsen stones, each weighing 25 tons, were dragged from Marlborough Downs. No wheels, no machines, just human hands, rope, and absolute determination. This journey took decades. Generations were born and died in the effort to bring these stones to one specific location on Salisbury Plain. Why would ancient people expend such staggering effort? The answer lies in what those stones would do once they stood upright. Positioned with extraordinary precision, they would capture the winter solstice sunrise in a way that bordered on the miraculous. On the longest night of the year, when fear gripped hardest, the first rays of returning sun would thread perfectly through the stone arrangement, illuminating a path. Light would announce its own return. Construction of Stonehenge began around 3000 BCE and continued for over 1500 years. Early versions were simpler, but each generation added, adjusted, and refined. They were building more than a monument. They were constructing a promise in stone. No matter how dark the year became, these stones would show them exactly when the sun began its journey back. Certainty against chaos. The engineering knowledge required was profound. The builders had to understand the sun's yearly path with precision. They had to calculate angles, maintain perfect sightlines across vast distances, and ensure the alignment would hold true for centuries. This wasn't primitive guesswork. It was sophisticated astronomy made permanent in rock. Standing inside the circle on the winter solstice morning must have felt like witnessing a miracle. The sun, which had been dying for months, would rise exactly where the stones predicted. Light would flood through the gaps as if the rocks themselves commanded it. Proof that the pattern held. Proof that the turn had come. Proof that they had read the heavens correctly. Those stones still stand today, still capturing the solstice light, exactly as designed 5,000 years ago. Modern pilgrims gather there every December, drawn by the same hunger for certainty their ancient ancestors felt. The monument outlasted the civilization that built it, outlasted their language, outlasted their names. But the message carved in its alignment remains perfectly clear. The sun returns. Spirals appear on stone across the ancient world with remarkable consistency. At Newgrange in Ireland, triple spirals grace the entrance stone, carved with patient precision. Sometime around 3200 BCE, similar spirals mark rocks in Galicia, Spain. They wind across standing stones in Scotland. They appear in petroglyphs throughout Scandinavia. Different lands, different peoples, same symbol emerging independently. The spiral captures something essential about the sun's journey. It doesn't simply disappear and reappear. It traces a path, winding down through autumn and early winter, reaching a center point of maximum darkness, then unwinding back toward light and warmth. The spiral maps this journey in a single, elegant form. It shows descent and return as one continuous motion. Celtic cultures particularly embraced the spiral as sacred. They carved it not just on monuments, but on everyday objects, on jewelry, on weapons, on the bones of the dead. The symbol traveled with them. It marked territory as belonging to people who understood the pattern of darkness and return, who knew that descent wasn't defeat, but part of an eternal cycle. Norse peoples carved sun wheels into rock circles with radiating lines or swirling arms that suggested rotation. These wheels marked sacred sites, boundary stones, and graves. They represented the sun as active force, not passive light source. The sun wheels suggested movement, effort, the wheel of the year turning through its stations. The solstice was when the wheel reached bottom and began the climb back. Indigenous peoples across North America created petroglyphs showing similar understanding. Spirals, concentric circles, radiating patterns, all appearing at sites where solstice, sunrise, or sunset could be observed. These weren't mere decorations. They were maps of cosmic truth, rendered simple enough that anyone could grasp the meaning. The sun goes, the sun returns, the pattern holds. What's remarkable is how little these symbols needed to communicate so much. A few curved lines said what volumes of text struggle to express. They said, "We have watched, we have understood, We know what comes next. They said, this darkness is temporary. They said, hold on, the turn is coming. Carved in stone, these messages would outlast the carvers by millennia, still speaking their simple truth to anyone who stopped to look. Buried in frozen Scandinavian earth, archaeologists have found extraordinary things. Gold rings carefully placed in the ground, grain stored in clay vessels and hidden, precious amber beads arranged in patterns, tools of finest craftsmanship wrapped and interred. These weren't accidental losses. They were deliberate offerings, gifts given to the earth itself during the darkest days of winter. The logic of sacrifice during the solstice makes a certain beautiful sense. The people had so little, winter had already taken their summer abundance. Food stores ran low, warmth was scarce, light was failing, and yet, at this moment of maximum scarcity, they took what was most valuable and gave it away. They placed their gold, their grain, their beauty into the frozen ground, as if feeding a sleeping god. Perhaps they believed the earth needed to be reminded of abundance before it could produce abundance again. Perhaps they thought the sun required payment for its return. Perhaps they simply needed to demonstrate faith in the future, to prove they believed there would be another harvest, another summer, another year worth saving precious things for. The offering was an act of trust that bordered on reckless. At sites across Denmark, Sweden, and Norway, these winter deposits cluster around the solstice period. The timing matters. These weren't casual votive offerings made whenever convenient. They were synchronized with the turning point, placed in the ground at the exact moment when the sun stood still before returning. The offering marked the pivot point between decline and renewal. Gold, particularly, appears again and again, soft, imperishable, associated with the sun itself. Golden light, golden grain, golden rings, all given back to the darkness in hope of the light's return. Some pieces show signs of ritual damage, deliberately broken before burial. The sacrifice had to be real. It had to cost something. It had to hurt a little, or it meant nothing. These offerings were discovered centuries later, still in place, never retrieved. The people who buried them either never came back or chose not to take back what they'd given. The gifts remained gifts. The gold stayed in the ground. The promise was kept. Winter passed, spring came, and the offerings lay undisturbed, holding their vigil in the darkness until modern archaeologists' tools brought them back into light. Rome conquered the known world, but stopped for the sun. Every December, the greatest empire in history paused its relentless expansion and celebrated Saturnalia, festival of chaos, role reversal, and desperate joy. Slaves dined while masters served. Courts closed. War ceased. For several days, the iron order of Roman society dissolved into something wild and necessary. They needed to remember there were forces beyond empire, powers that even Rome had to honor. Saturnalia honored Saturn, ancient god of agriculture and time, but the festival's timing revealed its deeper purpose. It coincided with the winter solstice, those darkest days when the sun hung lowest and weakest. The Romans weren't just celebrating a god. They were marking the moment when the natural order itself seemed most fragile, when even the sun needed encouragement to return. But Rome absorbed more than it created. As legions conquered east and west, they encountered solar worship everywhere. Mithraism from Persia, with its birth of the unconquered sun. Sol Invictus from Syria, the invincible sun whose festival fell on December 25th. Egyptian cults of Ra and Aten. Each conquered people brought their own ways of honoring the solstice, and Rome, pragmatic always, wove them together into a celebration vast enough to encompass an empire. By the 3rd century, Emperor Aurelian had officially established the cult of Sol Invictus. The unconquered sun became patron of the Roman Empire itself. Every December 25th, the sun's birthday was celebrated with games, feasts, and public ceremonies. The timing wasn't coincidental. It marked the moment when the sun, having reached its lowest point at solstice, began its victorious return. Unconquered indeed, had survived the darkness once again. The genius of Roman solar worship was its universality. Everyone, regardless of origin or local tradition, understood the sun. Everyone feared its absence. Everyone celebrated its return. The cult of Sol Invictus became a unifying force, binding diverse peoples through shared acknowledgement of the one power even emperors couldn't command. Rome ruled the earth, but the sun ruled Rome. Later, Christianity would absorb this timing entirely, placing the birth of Christ at the same moment pagans celebrated the sun's rebirth. New religion, old instinct. The date stuck because the human hunger for light in darkness transcends doctrine. December 25th remains, in its bones, a solstice celebration, a marking of return, hope, and the refusal to accept permanent night. In the frozen halls of Scandinavia, skalds told of Baldur the Beautiful, most beloved of all gods. His mother, Frigg, loved him so desperately, she traveled the world, making every living thing swear never to harm him. Fire promised, water promised, stone, metal, plants, animals, souls, swore oaths. Baldur became invincible, and the gods made sport of throwing weapons at him, laughing as everything bounced harmlessly away. But Frigg had overlooked one small thing. Mistletoe, young and innocent, seemed too harmless to bother with. Loki, trickster and chaos-bringer, noticed this omission. He fashioned a dart from mistletoe and placed it in the hands of Baldur's blind brother, Hodr. Guided by Loki, Hodr, through the mistletoe, pierced Baldur's heart. The most beautiful god fell dead. Light went out of the world. The gods raged and mourned. They sent messengers to Hel, goddess of the underworld, begging for Baldur's return. She agreed on one condition: every living thing must weep for him. If even one creature refused, Baldur would remain dead forever. Messengers raced across the world, and everything wept willingly. Stones wept, trees wept, metal wept, all creation mourned. But Loki, in the form of an old woman, refused. One creature remained dried, and so Baldur stayed in the realm of death. The world became darker, colder, colder. Winter deepened. The gods could only wait and hope that at the end of time, after Ragnarok destroyed and remade the world, Baldur might return. He would rise from Hel and bring light back to a new creation. Vikings told this story during the darkest days of winter, during the solstice, when light seemed to have abandoned the earth. The parallel was unmistakable. Baldur's death mirrored the sun's decline. His imprisonment in the underworld matched the sun's terrible absence, and the promise of his eventual return carried the hope that spring would come again, that light wouldn't stay buried forever. These weren't just entertaining tales. They were survival tools. When the darkness felt crushing, when the cold bit deep, when food stores dwindled and hope grew thin, the story of Baldur reminded the Vikings that death isn't always permanent, that something beautiful can descend into darkness and still return. That winter, no matter how absolute it seems, is followed by spring. They needed stories to survive the night. Across the world, separated by oceans and mountains, cultures developed solstice ceremonies independently. In ancient China, the Dongzi festival marked the arrival of winter's peak. Families gathered to eat Tongan rice balls, symbolizing reunion and completeness, and welcomed the gradual return of yang energy. The Chinese understood the solstice as cosmic balance shifting, yin reaching maximum before yang began its slow restoration. Light would return because the universe required balance. The Inca Empire, high in the Andean mountains, celebrated Inti Raymi, the festival of the sun, in Cusco, their capital. The Sapa Inca himself performed rituals to strengthen the weakening sun. They fasted for days beforehand, preparing themselves to plead with their most important deity. At dawn on the solstice, the Inca ruler would greet the rising sun, offering coca leaves, maize, and sometimes more precious gifts. The ceremony acknowledged fear the sun might continue fading and demonstrated faith that proper ritual could ensure its return. Celtic peoples across Ireland, Scotland, and Wales celebrated Alba Narthen, the light of winter. They lit bonfires on hilltops, creating chains of flame across the landscape. From one peak, you could see fires burning on distant peaks, an entire region united in pushing back the darkness. The Druids performed ceremonies at stone circles, acknowledging the turning point and the promise written in the stones. The fires would burn through the longest night, human light defying the sun's absence. In what is now the southwestern United States, ancestral Puebloan peoples built structures aligned to capture the solstice sun. At Chaco Canyon, the sun dagger petroglyph is bisected by a shaft of light precisely at noon on the winter solstice. Thousands of miles from Stonehenge, different people arrived at the same solution. Mark the turning point with architecture. Make the sun's return observable and certain. Japanese Shinto tradition holds that the sun goddess Amaterasu once hid in a cave, plunging the world into darkness. The other gods tried everything to lure her out. They danced, sang, and created such joyful commotion that Amaterasu grew curious and peeked out. They caught her reflection in a mirror and pulled her fully into the world again. Light returned. The story maps perfectly onto winter solstice, the sun hiding, the community working to call it back, the eventual return of light. These separate traditions reveal something profound. The human response to the dying sun wasn't culturally determined. It was universal. Every people, regardless of geography or history, developed ceremonies to mark and honor the solstice. They built monuments, they lit fires, they fasted, feasted, and prayed. The specific forms varied, but the core impulse remained identical. We do not accept darkness passively. We call the light home. Ancient Babylonian astronomers kept meticulous records. On clay tablets, they tracked the sun's position throughout the year with accuracy that bordered on obsessive. They noted where it rose, where it set, the angle of its noon shadow, the length of daylight. Generation after generation, priest astronomers added to these records, building a database of celestial behavior spanning centuries. They watched patterns emerge. By 1800 BCE, Babylonian astronomers could predict the exact day of the winter solstice years in advance. They knew when the sun would reach its lowest point and begin its return. This knowledge was power, literal power over the people's fear. When commoners worried the sun might not return, the astronomers could say with certainty, 3 more days. Hold on for 3 more days, and you'll see. The prediction made anxiety bearable. But they weren't alone in this pursuit. Halfway across the world, Mayan astronomers developed equally sophisticated systems. They tracked Venus with precision we couldn't match until the invention of telescopes. They calculated the solar year as 365.2420 days, remarkably close to our modern SL measurement of 365.24 to 2 days. Their calendar systems interlocked like cosmic gears, marking not just days, but vast cycles of creation and destruction. The Mayans built observatory structures with carefully positioned windows that framed specific astronomical events. At Chichen Itza, El Caracal Observatory allowed priests to track the sun, moon, and Venus at Uaxaction. Buildings aligned so the sun rose directly behind specific structures on the equinoxes and solstices. Architecture became a tool for reading the heavens. The buildings themselves were arguments in stone that the cosmos followed knowable patterns. Egyptian astronomers oriented the Great Pyramid so precisely to true north that modern surveyors marvel at the accuracy. They tracked Sirius, whose rising coincided with the Nile's flooding. They developed a 365-day calendar before most civilizations had writing. For the Egyptians, astronomy was survival. Reading the stars correctly meant predicting the flood, planning the harvest, maintaining order. The sun's daily journey across the sky mirrored Ra's nightly battle through the underworld cosmic drama with real-world consequences. What united these cultures wasn't shared knowledge, but shared hunger. They all needed to understand the sky. They all feared chaos and craved pattern. So they watched, recorded, calculated, and predicted. They turned anxiety into data, fear into mathematics. The winter solstice became not a moment of helpless waiting, but a precisely predicted turning point. Knowledge replaced terror. The sun would return because the numbers said so. Earth tilts. That's the secret beneath all the ceremony and stone. Our planet's axis leans 23.5 degrees away from perpendicular to its orbital plane as Earth circles the sun. This tilt means the northern hemisphere points toward the sun for half the year and away from it for the other half. When it points away, winter arrives. The sun's light strikes the surface at a steep angle, spreading thin, providing little warmth. Days shrink. Darkness dominates. Ancient people didn't understand the mechanics, but they observed the effects with accuracy that's startling. They noticed the sun's rising point shifted along the horizon throughout the year. In summer, it rose far to the northeast and set far to the northwest, arcing high across the sky. In winter, it rose southeast and set southwest, barely climbing above the horizon. The sun's path traced a yearly pattern, a cosmic sine wave they could map and predict. At the winter solstice, the northern hemisphere tilts maximally away from the sun. That's the moment the tilt reaches its extreme before beginning to reverse. The sun appears to stand still. Solstice literally means sun stand still in Latin for a few days. The sunrise and sunset points don't move appreciably. The sun seems frozen at its lowest point. Then, almost imperceptibly, it begins the long climb back toward summer. The southern hemisphere, meanwhile, experiences the opposite. When the north shivers through winter solstice, the south basks in summer solstice. The tilt that starves one hemisphere feeds the other. The planet's geometry creates opposite seasons, a seesaw of light and warmth that ensures Earth never suffers total winter or summer simultaneously. One side's darkest day is the other's brightest. This axial tilt isn't unique to Earth. Mars tilts 25 degrees and experiences dramatic seasons. Saturn tilts 27 degrees, creating seasons that last years because its orbit is so vast. Uranus tilts an extreme 98 degrees, essentially rolling along its orbital path, creating seasons of such extremity that one pole faces the sun continuously for 42 Earth years before the other takes its turn. Tilt creates seasons throughout the solar system. Understanding the mechanics doesn't diminish the solstice. If anything, it deepens the wonder. Ancient peoples were right to mark this moment as cosmically significant. The solstice is the point where Earth's relationship with the sun reaches its extreme and begins to reverse. It's written into planetary geometry, an inevitable consequence of how our world moves through space. The celebration wasn't superstition. It was accurate response to cosmic truth. The Maya developed 3 interlocking calendars, each measuring different cycles. The Tzolk'in ran 260 days, used for divination and ritual. The Hab ran 365 days, tracking the solar year. The long count measured time from a mythical creation date in 3114 BCE. These calendars meshed like gears, creating cycles within cycles, patterns of meaning that repeated across centuries. But here's what's remarkable. These calendars weren't just practical tools, they were sacred objects. The Maya didn't separate timekeeping from worship. Every day carried religious significance, every date connected to mythology. The calendar was simultaneously a scheduling device and a holy text. To know what day it was meant knowing where you stood in cosmic history. The Hab calendar divided the year into 18 months of 20 days each, plus 5 unlucky days at the end. Within this structure, they precisely tracked the solstices and equinoxes. Buildings at Mayan cities aligned to capture the solstice sun, just like Stonehenge. The temple of Kukulkan at Chichen Itza creates a serpent shadow effect on the equinoxes. Light and shadow combine to show a snake descending the pyramid. Steps divine presence made visible through architectural precision. This fusion of mathematics and mythology wasn't confused thinking. It was integrated worldview. The Maya understood the sun's movements. Mathematically, their calculations were accurate to decimal points. But they also understood the sun as divine being, a God requiring ritual and respect. Both truths coexisted without conflict. The precision of their astronomy reinforced their religious belief. If the gods ran the cosmos this perfectly, how could you not worship them? Ancient Babylonian astronomy operated similarly. The priests who predicted eclipses and tracked planets were religious figures. Their mathematical sophistication served divine purposes. When they calculated the solstice, they were simultaneously doing astronomy and theology. The boundary we draw between science and religion would have seemed artificial to them. This worldview had practical advantages. When religion and observation merged, people paid close attention to the natural world. Farming, navigation, and architecture all benefited from astronomical precision motivated by spiritual devotion. Faith didn't cloud observation, it motivated it. The desire to understand divine patterns pushed them to develop mathematics, create writing systems, and build observatories. The sacred made them scientific. Modern minds tend to separate these realms, putting myth in one box and measurement in another. But the ancient approach had a coherence we've lost. They counted the days because the days were holy. They tracked the sun because the sun was God. Mathematics was prayer, calendars were scripture, and the winter solstice was simultaneously calculable astronomical event and moment of supreme spiritual significance, both fully at once. Christianity celebrates Christmas on December 25th. The date appears nowhere in Scripture. The Gospels don't specify when Jesus was born. Early Christians didn't celebrate the birth at all. They focused on the resurrection. So why December 25th? Because it was already a holiday. Roman Sol Invictus, Syrian sun festivals, Persian Mithras celebrations, all clustered around the winter solstice. When Christianity spread through the empire, it absorbed the timing. This wasn't cynical appropriation. It was smart cultural adaptation. People already gathered in late December. They already lit candles, feasted, exchanged gifts, and celebrated the return of light. Christian leaders recognized something profound in these impulses. The metaphor was perfect. Christ as light of the world, born at the darkest time of year. The symbolism mapped beautifully onto existing solstice meanings. Why fight tradition when you could fulfill it? Yule, the ancient Germanic winter festival, transformed similarly. Pre-Christian Germanic peoples burned Yule logs, hung evergreen boughs, and celebrated through the longest nights. When Christianity arrived, these practices didn't disappear, they got reinterpreted. The Yule log became a Christian custom. Evergreens symbolized eternal life through Christ. The structure remained. The meaning shifted. Saturnalias, gift-giving, role reversal, and feasting found new expression in Christmas traditions. The Roman habit of masters serving slaves during Saturnalia echoed in Christian emphasis on charity and humility. The wild festival became tamer, but retained its core impulse. Winter demands generosity, light in darkness, hope against cold. Hanukkah, the Jewish festival of lights, falls near the solstice and involves lighting candles for 8 nights. The miracle of oil lasting 8 days is the religious core, but the timing and emphasis on light connect to solstice themes. Light multiplying in darkness, 1 day's worth becoming 8. Hope persisting against impossible odds. Different story, same human need. Kwanzaa, created in 1966, deliberately positions itself in late December and centers on lighting candles. The Kinara holds 7. Though modern in origin, it taps into ancient solstice impulses, gathering community, honoring ancestors, affirming values, creating light together. The form is contemporary, but the pattern is ancient. What these transformations reveal is the durability of the solstice impulse. You can change the religion, alter the mythology, shift the specific practices, but humans keep returning to the same moment with the same needs. We need to mark the darkness. We need to create light. We need to gather together and affirm that this cold won't last forever. The names change, but the hunger remains constant. 5,000 years of different peoples saying the same thing. We will not let the darkness win without a fight. In 1967, archaeologist Michael O'Kelly stood inside the Newgrange Passage tomb in Ireland, waiting. Outside winter solstice dawn approached. The tomb had been sealed for 5,000 years before archaeologists excavated it. Local legends claimed the sun lit up the interior on the shortest day, but nobody knew if it was true. O'Kelly stood in darkness and waited to see. The sun rose. A shaft of light entered through a specially constructed roof box above the entrance. The beam traveled down the 60-foot passage, illuminating the burial chamber with golden light for 17 minutes. The precision was breathtaking. 5,000 years after construction, the alignment still worked perfectly. The ancient builders had created a machine for capturing the solstice sun, and it still ran true. Newgrange isn't alone. Across Ireland and Britain, passage tombs align to the winter solstice sunrise. Maeshowe in Scotland, Bryn Celli, DDU in Wales. These weren't accidents. The alignment required sophisticated astronomical knowledge and engineering skill. The builders had to calculate the sun's position centuries into the future, accounting for the slight drift caused by Earth's axial precession. They had to align the structure precisely, maintain the sightline, and ensure the roof box sat at exactly the right height and angle. What were they saying with these monuments? Perhaps the message was about death and rebirth. The tombs housed the dead, and the solstice sun, illuminating those spaces, linked death with the sun's own death and return. The bodies resting in darkness would receive light at the turning point, a promise that death wasn't final, that return was possible, that light always comes back. Or perhaps the message was simpler. We understand. We have watched the sky and learned its patterns. We know when the turn comes. This knowledge is so important, we've written it in stone. Future generations will stand here and see what we saw. The alignment is our gift to them, certainty against fear. Modern archaeoastronomy studies these alignments systematically. Researchers use computer models to reconstruct ancient skies, accounting for axial precession. They map structures across landscapes, finding patterns of astronomical alignment repeated at site after site. What emerges is evidence of sophisticated observation spanning centuries. The standing stones, passage tombs, and earthworks weren't primitive attempts at science. They were accurate observations, expressed in the most permanent medium available. The message written in stone has finally been read. Ancient peoples watched the sky with dedication that matched any modern astronomer. They tracked patterns with precision. They encoded their knowledge in architecture that would outlast language. And they succeeded. 5,000 years later, we stand where they stood, watching the same light flood through the same stones, finally understanding what they were trying to tell us. We know when the light returns. Deep in Lascaux Cave in southwestern France, painted aurochs and horses gallop across limestone walls. The art dates to approximately 17,000 years ago, created by people who hunted reindeer and mammoth. For decades, scholars interpreted these paintings as hunting magic or shamanic visions. But some researchers now notice something else. Astronomical markers painted alongside the animals. Certain dots, dashes, and geometric shapes appear repeatedly across cave art sites in Europe. They don't depict animals or objects. They're abstract clusters of dots in specific patterns, lines arranged in particular ways. One interpretation suggests these represent lunar phases or seasonal markers. The paintings might be beautiful art and practical calendar simultaneously, recording when animals migrated, when plants fruited, when winter solstice arrived. If this interpretation holds, cave art becomes evidence of long-term observation. The painters watched the sky and tracked patterns across seasons and years. They recorded what they learned in the most permanent way they knew: medges, painted deep in protected caves where weather could unterrace them. The caves weren't just ritual spaces, they were archives. Rock art across North America shows similar possibilities. Petroglyphs in Chaco Canyon align with solstice sunrise. At Fajada Butte, the Sun Dagger site, light and shadow create precise markers on spiral petroglyphs during solstices and equinoxes. The art isn't separate from astronomy, it's integrated. Beauty and information combine in a single image. Australian Aboriginal rock art includes representations of celestial events. Some images appear to depict supernova visible in the southern hemisphere centuries ago. Other petroglyphs mark solstice, sunrise points. The Aboriginal peoples maintained oral traditions containing sophisticated astronomical knowledge. They knew the planets, tracked their movements, and built this knowledge into their science. The rock art preserved pieces of this tradition in visual form. What's striking is how rock art and sophisticated astronomy coexist in cultures we've often labeled primitive. The people painting in Lascaux 17,000 years ago weren't simple hunter-gatherers with no understanding beyond survival. They were keen observers, building knowledge systems and finding ways to preserve and transmit that knowledge. They were, in their way, scientists. The images endure. Long after the cultures that created them vanished, the paintings remain. Animals frozen mid-gallop, mysterious dots and dashes hiding astronomical data, spirals catching solstice light. The art speaks if we learn to listen properly. It tells us ancient people watched, recorded, and understood. It tells us they cared enough about the patterns to make them permanent. It tells us the solstice mattered so much they painted it on walls that would last forever. Every winter solstice, thousands of people gather at Stonehenge. They arrive in darkness, bundled against the cold, carrying candles and flashlights. Police open the site for this one night, allowing visitors inside the stone circle. Druids in white robes perform ceremonies. Tourists snap photos. Families huddle together. Everyone waits for sunrise. The crowd is remarkably diverse. Modern pagans reconstructing ancient rituals stand beside secular tourists seeking an experience. New Age spiritual seekers mix with history buffs and photography enthusiasts. Some people take it deadly seriously, chanting and meditating. Others simply enjoy the communal atmosphere. But they all there for the same reason, to witness the solstice sunrise at a place designed 5,000 years ago for exactly this purpose. When the sun finally rises, threading light through the standing stones, a cheer goes up. People embrace strangers, cameras flash, druids raise their staffs. For a few minutes, the ancient and modern collapse together. The alignment works exactly as the builders intended. And everyone watching becomes part of the 5,000-year tradition. The stones connect them to ancestors they'll never know. This revival of solstice celebration began in the 20th century. For centuries, the stones stood neglected, their original purpose forgotten. Then archaeologists, historians, and spiritual seekers began piecing together what the monuments meant. As understanding grew, so did desire to experience the sites as they were meant to be experienced on the solstice, watching the sun align. Newgrange in Ireland now requires a lottery to witness the solstice sunrise from inside. My demand far exceeds the chamber's capacity. Winners receive notice months in advance. On solstice morning, they enter the dark tomb and wait, just as Michael O'Kelly did, just as ancient people did 5,000 years ago. When light fills the chamber, they're participating in a ritual that has literally outlasted empires. Chaco Canyon, Machu Picchu, Chichen Ancient sites around the world now host solstice gatherings. People travel thousands of miles to stand where ancient astronomers stood, watching the sun reach its turning point. The specific beliefs may have changed, but the impulse remains identical. We still need to mark the moment. We still need to gather together. We still need to witness the sun's return. What's beautiful is that it works. The stones still capture the light. The alignments still function. The sun still rises exactly where ancient builders predicted it would. Modern visitors receive the same assurance ancient people received. The pattern holds. The turn comes. The light returns. Different people, different era, same darkness, same hope, same sunrise. The circle remains unbroken. In 1543, Nicolaus Copernicus published on the revolutions of the heavenly spheres. The book argued that Earth orbits the sun, not the other way around. The idea wasn't entirely new. Greek astronomer Aristarchus had proposed it 18 centuries earlier, but Copernicus provided mathematical proof. The heliocentric model explained planetary motion more elegantly than the old geocentric system. It was right. Suddenly, the solstice meant something different. Earth wasn't the stationary center, with the sun circling around it. Earth was one planet among several, all orbiting the sun, and Earth's axial tilt created the seasons. The winter solstice marked Earth's maximum tilt away from the sun at one point in its orbit. It wasn't the sun growing weak, it was Earth's angle changing. The light didn't fade and return. Earth simply faced toward and away from constant light. This understanding could have destroyed the solstice's meaning. If it's just planetary mechanics, why celebrate? Why gather at stone circles? Why light fires? But something remarkable happened instead. Understanding the mechanics made the solstice more profound, not less. The turn from darkness to light wasn't magical intervention, it was cosmic, clockwork, reliable, knowable, mathematical. Ancient peoples had been right to trust the pattern. Their observations were accurate. Their predictions held true. They didn't understand the mechanism, but they'd correctly identified the pattern and built entire belief systems around its reliability. Science validated their faith. The sun did return every time, exactly when they said it would. Their stone monuments captured actual astronomical events with precision that modern engineers admire. Galileo's telescope, Kepler's laws of planetary motion, Newton's gravitational mathematics, each advance in astronomy confirmed what ancient people observed. The solstice was real. The patterns held. The universe operated according to knowable laws, and those laws ensured that winter would always surrender to spring, that darkness would always give way to light, that the turning point would come precisely when expected. This created a new kind of wonder. The universe wasn't chaotic, requiring constant appeasement to maintain order. It was orderly, following laws that human minds could discover and understand. The solstice became evidence of cosmic reliability. You didn't need to plead with gods or perform rituals to ensure the sun's return. It would return because physics demanded it. The celebration shifted from anxious propitiation to joyful acknowledgement of universal order. Understanding didn't diminish mystery, it deepened it. Now the question became, why these laws? Why this elegant mathematical structure? Why a universe that follows rules at all? The solstice remained a moment of wonder, but the wonder shifted from will the sun return to how magnificent that the universe operates with such precision that we can predict the sun's return thousands of years in advance. Knowledge transformed anxiety into awe. Earth tilts 23.5 degrees. Mars tilts 25. The similarity isn't coincidental. Both planets likely suffered massive impacts during the solar system's violent youth, knocks that left them leaning. Mars experiences seasons like Earth, though each lasts roughly twice as long because Mars takes 687 Earth days to orbit the Sun. During Martian winter, carbon dioxide freezes out of the atmosphere and snows down at the poles. The planet's thin atmosphere makes seasons more extreme than Earth's. Saturn tilts 27 degrees, creating seasons that last 7 Earth years each, because Saturn takes 29 years to complete one orbit. The planet's famous rings, composed of ice and rock particles, shift their apparent angle as Saturn orbits. When the planet's north pole tilts toward the Sun, we see the rings from above. When it tilts away, we see them from below. The shift happens gradually, one spectacular solstice to the next, measured in years. Uranus is extraordinary. It tilts 98 degrees essentially, lying on its side as it orbits. This extreme tilt means each pole alternately faces the Sun for 42 Earth years, while the other endures 42 years of darkness. Imagine a winter solstice that lasts for decades. The entire planet experiences seasons of such duration that alien life there would experience only 1 or 2 seasonal shifts in a lifetime. Jupiter, massive and spinning rapidly, tilts just 3 degrees. It barely has seasons. The planet's horizontal bands of clouds remain relatively consistent year-round. Its rapid rotation, one day lasts only 10 hours, creates fierce weather, but seasonal variation is minimal, without significant tilt. Jupiter never experiences the solar drama that defines life on Earth. Mercury has almost no tilt at all, just a fraction of a degree. Combined with its lack of atmosphere, this means the sunny side bakes at 800 degrees Fahrenheit, while the shadowed side freezes at -290. There are no seasons, no solstices, no gradual changes, just eternal extremes, depending on where you stand. Venus tilts 177 degrees essentially upside down. This flipped orientation means its axial tilt is actually 3 degrees from vertical, similar to Jupiter. Venus rotates backward compared to most planets and takes longer to rotate once than to orbit the Sun once. A Venusian day lasts 243 Earth days, longer than its 225-day year. With minimal tilt and thick atmosphere, Venus has no seasons, just consistent, crushing heat at nearly 900 degrees. These variations show that Earth's axial tilt isn't standard. It's one possibility in a range of planetary orientations. Our 23.5 degree angle creates moderate seasons that cycle predictably through the year. Not too extreme like Uranus, not too subtle like Jupiter. Just enough tilt to create the solstices our ancestors learned to predict and celebrate. The universe doesn't require seasons, but our particular planet provides them in measure that makes life possible and rhythm observable. We're lucky, tilted at just the right angle. Earth's axis doesn't point at the same star forever. It wobbles like a spinning top, tracing a slow circle through space. This wobble, called axial precession, takes 25,772 years to complete one full cycle. Currently, Earth's north pole points toward Polaris, our North Star, but 13,000 years ago, it pointed near Vega. 13,000 years from now, it will point near Vega again. Greek astronomer Hipparchus discovered this precession around 127 BCE. He compared contemporary star positions to positions recorded by Babylonian astronomers centuries earlier and noticed a systematic shift. The stars hadn't moved, Earth's orientation had. His discovery revealed that even our most fixed reference points slowly circle. This precession affects everything aligned to the solstice. Stonehenge, built 5,000 years ago, still captures the solstice sunrise, but not quite as perfectly as it once did. The tiny shift accumulated over millennia creates a small misalignment. In another 5,000 years, the shift will be more noticeable. Eventually, the stones will no longer point precisely at the solstice sun. The monument's meaning will become mysterious again, just as it was mysterious to us before we rediscovered its purpose. Ancient Egyptian pyramids, aligned to true north with extraordinary precision, now show tiny discrepancies. When they were built, Earth's axis pointed slightly differently. The builders weren't wrong. Earth shifted underneath their perfect alignments. The monuments remain, but the reference points they marked have drifted. The precision of their alignment actually proves their age. Precession also affects which constellations appear behind the sun during each season. Currently, the sun passes through Sagittarius during the northern hemisphere's winter solstice. But due to precession, the solstice slowly moves through the zodiac. Ancient Greeks observed the winter solstice sun in Capricorn, which is why the Tropic of Capricorn is named for when the sun reaches its southernmost point. The name has stuck, but the sun's position has shifted. This creates the distinction between sidereal and tropical zodiac systems. Sidereal astrology uses the current position of constellations. Tropical astrology uses the position of constellations 2,000 years ago, when the system was standardized. They've drifted apart by almost 30 degrees, one full zodiac sign. Precession created this split, this slow drift between what is and what was. 26,000 years is a vast cycle, incomprehensible to individual human lives. No one witnesses it complete. Civilizations rise and fall multiple times within one precession cycle. The Great Pyramid has existed for less than 1/5 of a cycle. Human civilization itself spans barely half a cycle, but the wobble continues, patient and relentless, slowly wheeling our planet's orientation through space, changing which stars guide navigators, which points align to monuments, which constellations host the solstice sun. The universe operates on timescales that make empires look like mayflies. In the jungles of Central America, LiDAR technology has revealed entire cities hidden beneath the canopy. Light detection and ranging uses laser pulses to map ground topography, penetrating vegetation that would block normal photography. What archaeologists discovered stunned them. Massive urban complexes, aligned roadways, astronomical observatories, and structures precisely oriented to solstice, sunrise, and sunset. At sites like El Mirador and Caracol, LiDAR revealed construction more sophisticated than previously imagined. Mayan cities weren't small ceremonial centers, they were metropolises with hundreds of thousands of residents. Complex water management and astronomical architecture woven throughout. Structures aligned to track not just solstices but equinoxes, Venus cycles, and eclipses. The cities themselves were enormous astronomical instruments. Ground-penetrating radar at Stonehenge revealed a massive ring of shafts surrounding the monument. These pits, more than 30 feet deep and 10 feet wide, form a circle over a mile in diameter, with Stonehenge at its center. The discovery suggests Stonehenge wasn't an isolated monument, but part of a vast ritual landscape. The scale of effort required to dig hundreds of these pits speaks to how seriously ancient Britons took their astronomical alignments. At Göbekli Tepe, in Turkey, a site dating to 9600 BCE, researchers used astronomical software to analyze the stone pillars' alignments. Results suggest the site tracked multiple astronomical events, including the summer solstice. If confirmed, this pushes architectural astronomy back 6,000 years earlier than previously believed. People were aligning monuments to the solstice before they invented agriculture, before pottery, before metal tools. High-resolution satellite imagery reveals geoglyphs across the Peruvian desert, enormous drawings, visible only from the air. Many align to solstice, sunrise, or sunset. The Nazca lines aren't random artistic expression. They're astronomical markers integrated into the landscape. From ground level, they're incomprehensible. From above, they map cosmic patterns onto Earth itself. In Egypt, researchers, using cosmic ray winds particles created by cosmic rays hitting the atmosphere, scanned the interior of pyramids, searching for hidden chambers. The technology revealed voids that conventional archaeology hadn't found. While not all relate to astronomy, the discoveries confirm that pyramid construction involved knowledge and techniques more advanced than long assumed. The precision of their alignments appears less surprising when viewed alongside evidence of their general sophistication. These technologies are rewriting our understanding of ancient astronomical knowledge. The civilizations that watched the solstice weren't primitive people clinging to superstition. They were sophisticated observers who understood enough astronomy to embed it permanently in their architecture. They had knowledge systems refined over centuries, mathematical precision, and engineering skill. They watched the sky with dedication that rivaled modern astronomy and expressed what they learned in monuments that would outlast their languages, religions, and names. We're only now developing tools sensitive enough to read what they wrote in stone. The word solstice combines two Latin roots, sol meaning sun and sister, meaning to stand still. For several days around the solstice, the sun's rising and setting points barely move along the horizon. It reaches its extreme position and pauses, seeming to hover at its turning point before beginning the long journey back. The sun stands still before moving again. That pause holds enormous psychological weight. For months, the sun has been declining, each day a little weaker, a little more absent. The trajectory seems relentless, unstoppable. Then it reaches the solstice, and for a few days, nothing changes. The decline stops. The sun hovers at its lowest point. Uncertainty hangs in the balance. Will it continue falling? Has it stopped forever at this weak point? Or will it begin the return? Ancient peoples, wading through this pause, must have felt crushing anxiety. The pattern suggested the sun would return it had every previous year. But patterns can break. What if this year was different? What if the decline continued until the sun disappeared entirely? They had no guarantee, only hope based on past observation. Faith, essentially, that the universe would keep operating as it had before. That's why the rituals clustered around the solstice itself. The offerings, the fires, the vigils, they happened at the turning point during the pause. People didn't wait to see if the sun would return. They acted during the uncertainty. They lit fires when the outcome wasn't yet determined. They gave offerings before receiving proof that spring would come. The faith was in the acting, not in the waiting for confirmation. Modern people experience turning points similarly, moments when everything hangs in balance before resolution. Medical test results pending, job applications submitted, relationships at crisis points, seeds planted before harvest. The solstice pause mirrors these human experiences, the moment between descent and return, when the direction will change but hasn't yet, when hope faces directly into uncertainty. The sun doesn't actually pause, of course. Earth's motion through space is constant. But from our perspective, the sun's position appears stable for several days around the solstice. The appearance creates the meaning. What matters isn't the mechanical reality, but the human experience, that moment of stillness before the change, that breath held before exhaling, that pause pregnant with either continuation of darkness or return of light. When the sun finally begins its return, moving northward again, lengthening the days incrementally, the relief must have been overwhelming. The pattern held, the trust was justified, the offerings were accepted, or the fires worked, or the prayers were heard, or the universe simply continued operating as it had since time began. Light would return, spring would come, life would go on. The pause ended, and the sun moved again, climbing slowly back toward summer. The longest night was over. For 40,000 years, humans have marked the winter solstice. The tradition stretches back beyond recorded history, beyond agriculture, beyond permanent settlements. When we were still nomadic hunters following reindeer herds across frozen tundra, we noticed the sun's decline and celebrated its return. The impulse to honor this moment is older than civilization itself. Every culture, regardless of geography or technological development, created solstice rituals. The specific forms varied wildly. Some built monuments, others lit fires, some made offerings, others held feasts, some danced through the night, others kept silent vigil. But beneath the varied expressions lay identical impulse: mark the turning point, acknowledge the darkness, celebrate the return of light. This universality suggests something profound about human nature. We're the species that notices patterns and refuses to accept them passively. We don't simply endure winter, we respond to it. We don't just fear the dying sun, we light fires against it. We're not content to wait helplessly for spring. We act, we gather together, we create ceremony and meaning, we push back. The astronomical precision many cultures achieved is staggering. Without telescopes, calculators, or computers, they tracked the sun's movements with accuracy that rivals modern measurements. They predicted the solstice centuries in advance. They aligned massive stone structures to capture specific sunrise angles. They encoded astronomical data in architecture that would outlast empires. All this before writing, before metal tools, before what we call civilization. What drove this dedication? Fear, certainly. The very real terror that the sun might not return, that winter might never end, that darkness might prove permanent. But fear alone doesn't explain the sophistication. Fear might motivate simple propitiation, offering sacrifices, saying prayers. It doesn't motivate centuries of careful observation, mathematical calculation, and astronomical architecture. The drive was deeper than fear. It was insistence on understanding, refusal to accept cosmic events as incomprehensible, determination to read the patterns and predict what comes next. The ancient astronomers weren't just religious supplicants pleading with the sun. They were scientists observing, recording, calculating, and encoding their knowledge for future generations. They were humans using the most powerful tool our species possesses, the ability to notice patterns and share that knowledge across time. 40,000 years of unbroken tradition. Ice ages came and went. Sea levels rose and fell. Species went extinct. Continents shifted. Human populations migrated across the globe, spreading to every climate and ecosystem. Languages evolved and disappeared. Technologies advanced from stone tools to space stations. Empires rose and crumbled to dust. But through it all, humans kept marking the winter solstice, kept lighting fires in the darkness, kept building monuments to track the sun, kept gathering to witness the turning point, kept insisting that darkness, no matter how deep, is temporary, kept trusting that light returns. Breathe deep. Feel the warmth of ancient fires still glowing in your chest. These stories live because people remembered them, whispered them forward through time. If this journey helped you rest, share it with a friend who needs gentle darkness before sleep. Leave a quiet thought in the comments about which moment touched you most. And if you'd like more history to carry you into dreams, let the next video find you. For now, just breathe. The sun always returns. It always has. So that's how they did it. How ancient hands pushed back the longest night. They built circles of stone, lit fires on frozen peaks, danced until dawn, painted the sky gold again. They sang the sun back into existence. And here we are, still watching the same sky, still celebrating the return of light. Maybe they were right. Maybe our attention, our hope, our gathered warmth does matter. Maybe the sun rises because we believe it will. As you drift off tonight, carry one question with you. What would you light a fire for? What darkness would you refuse to let win? Rest now. Let the longest night hold you gently. The sun will rise. It always does. Sweet dreams.